We've touched on Pennsylvania a few times lately, and today we've got some big news coming out of the Keystone State which could affect how legalization turns out. So let's hop straight into it and see what's happening over in Pennsylvania.
Legalized recreational could be coming to Pennsylvania. At least that's the hope of a Republican senator who chaired the first committee hearing on the subject today. But as political editor John Delano reports, it may not happen as quickly as some would like.
A growing number of state lawmakers say it's time to legalize, regulate, and tax all use here, just as neighboring states of New York and New Jersey have done. State Senator Mike Regan, a former U.S. Marshal, says unlike medical, which is strictly controlled by the state, recreational marijuana shipped here by crime syndicates is often dangerous. And legalization means regulating its quality.
We find they're being laced with fentanyl, being laced with embalming fluid, contain all kinds of pathogens. I mean, a really unsafe product.
While some say those fears are exaggerated, Regan says public safety is not the only reason to legalize and tax recreational.
Behind every drug operation is violence, guns, murder, all those things. And there's billions of dollars from Pennsylvania and other states going across the border into Mexico, into Colombia, into source countries to these cartels.
Now, a few points to touch on and a few things to note on what we just heard there, guys. First off, I find it pretty interesting and pretty remarkable that all of a sudden people are really concerned about health when it comes to herb. Heck, I remember back in the day when herb was not regulated, there were flour, there was bricks, and there was all types of stuff with stems, seeds, dirt. It could just straight up smell like ammonia. And I'm still here, I'm still living. Now, number two, I do think that when it comes to some of these markets, definitely the cartel and people like that are involved. Some of these unscrupulous actors are often peddling a lot of other things, not just the good herb. Number three, I think it's a little overblown talking about stuff that's laced with stuff, because personally I think that those cases are very rare. We've actually done a video on that recently where some recently released body camera footage showed someone who claimed that they were under the influence of laced herb. Now, if you actually had a look at that, the entire thing seemed sketchy, sus, and a lot of people just thought that dude was straight up lying. And number four, when it comes to Pennsylvania, I do think that a lot of tax dollars are being lost, but it's not necessarily due to the cartel. I do think that a lot of the neighboring states are hotspots for people who just want to collect some herb. Heck, imagine if you're living in one state and all the states around you have legalized. You don't need to deal with the cartels down at the border. You can just go to the state next door. But that's just my personal view on it. Drop it in the comments, let me know what you guys think. And just a quick reminder, guys, if you're getting value from this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or cop some merch from the merch store. Now let's pop back in and hear what some of these officials had to say about this entire issue.
At a hearing on Monday, state senators heard witnesses advocate for legalized, but Scott Bond with the Chiefs of Police Association, not invited to testify, has reservations.
I think they need to take a step back.
Bond says more data needs to be collected from states where is already legal. He worries about the impact on young people, families, and those driving on the road.
Those who are in the field of alcohol and/or controlled substances and their relative input and the impact that they can share with the committee and help frame this in a way that we can move it forward.
Regan says his committee will have more hearings before drafting a final bill.
I get a bill probably in May, early June, and then run the bill out sometime in June, maybe July. So we're not on this isn't happening tomorrow.
It took years to get medical approved here, but Regan thinks this effort will go faster, in part because it could bring in $500 million to $1 billion in tax revenue.
Now, you guys hear them say things like that all the time. The kids are the reason for banning a lot of these things. The kids are the reason for slowing legalization. The kids are the reason for more regulation. But one thing that really irks me is when a lot of these people like this dude actually compare it to alcohol. They're two completely different substances. Stop doing that. Now, one thing you guys would have heard me say at the top of the video is that out of the Keystone State, we got some interesting news which will dictate how legalization could be rolled out. And thankfully, a lot of those voters down in Pennsylvania are not just silly stoners as the stereotype would have you think, but a lot of them actually seem to prefer that herb is legalized through private stores instead of state-run models. Now, why this is so big, guys, is because some of those state-run models can really cause monopolies in the industry. Think of places like Florida or companies like Curaleaf or Trulieve. Now, it may not always be the case, but a lot of times some of these private stores are smaller mom-and-pop stores or just smaller local businesses. Now, we'll dig into that poll in a bit, but let's hear what the lawmakers had to say just a couple months back.
State lawmakers are once again trying to legalize recreational in Pennsylvania. Most of our neighboring states already allow it. Chris Hoffman spoke with one of the bill's sponsors about what's included in the legislation.
For the past few years, we've seen similar bills be brought up during the legislative session, and every time they haven't passed. So we wanted to know what makes it different and if this one will actually get to the finish line. According to lawmakers, 24 other states, nearly all that border Pennsylvania, have approved recreational. Representative Dan Franco is sponsoring a bill to allow it here. He says weed is already in Pennsylvania, but it's on the illegal market.
The toothpaste is already out of the tube. Weed is everywhere. We need to find a way to make it safe.
Similar to alcohol laws, users would have to be 21 to buy products. As for the exact amount of tax money it would generate, that's still to be determined. The state wants its share of revenue, but also wants to stay competitive against other states.
It's about time we find a way to prioritize public health, social justice, and revenue for the state instead of just letting an illegal marketplace flourish.
Plans would also include addressing the history of communities negatively impacted by the criminalization of weed. Rep. Frankel says the model for selling would be a hybrid system. Growing and processing would be private, and selling would be similar to state stores with liquor. As for where this all stands right now in the legislative process, it's still early on. The General Assembly gets sworn in on January 7th and then goes to work.
My expectation is that we could probably see a vote sometime early spring.
Rep. Franco is optimistic it can pass. While he expects challenges, he says they have had numerous hearings to try to address the success and failures of other states on the issue. In response to proposals in the past, the executive director of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association has come out against legislation like this. They cited unanticipated consequences it could have on public safety. As discussions on this proposed legislation continue, we'll be sure to keep you updated.
So Pennsylvania is once again trying to bring rec to the people, and the people have spoken. The people have made their voices clear. They want rec. The sticking point at this moment seems to be figuring out how exactly are they going to roll that out. Is it going to be a state-run model, or is it going to be a private business-run model? Or is it going to be a hybrid model of both? Now, according to this article and this new poll, it actually says that voters say they favor a model where herb is sold by licensed private businesses rather than through a system of state-run stores, as some legislators have promoted. Now, we've spoken on this already. The Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has actually signaled his willingness to legalize down in Pennsylvania, but some lawmakers seem to be in favor of a state-run model, and that has its own problems. We've seen in some situations, state-run models, they try to monopolize the industry and prevent home growers from, well, home growing, which is obviously a big problem. Now, according to this article, and I quote, a new legal memo concludes that the government-run approach is fundamentally defective and would be preempted by federal law. The survey reaffirmed what we've seen countless times already, and that's a majority, in this case, 74% of Pennsylvania voters back legalizing adult use sales in the Keystone State. And like I said, the question comes down to, is it going to be a state-run model or is it going to be a private business-run model? And the results showed a strong preference for the private commercial model that has been established already in other states. And you guys seen instances where lawmakers see polls and they ask people to vote, and when the votes come back and it's not what they wanted, they ask you to vote again. They say you're confused and you didn't know what you were doing. So in this situation, the question was actually posed twice, and there was a majority preference for the privatized option in both cases. And it goes on, and I quote, after learning more about both options, including being told that the state-run stores will allow the state to control pricing, sales, and distribution, potentially generating more public revenue, but limiting opportunities for Pennsylvania businesses and competition, support for the private model jumped to 57%, and the state-run preference stayed steady at only 25%. Now, what can also be a problem is that under any state-run approach, state officials will be directly responsible for procuring, marketing, distributing, and selling herb in state-owned liquor stores. Imagine that. You have to get your herb from a liquor store. And that right there, I think, is a big problem when it comes to legalization. A lot of people still compare the herb to liquor. One is super destructive and one has got tons of medical benefits. But that's just my point of view on things. Let me know what you guys think about all that. Drop it in the comments down below. I'm really interested to find out what you guys think. As a consumer, would you guys prefer a state-run model when it comes to rec herb? Again, think big companies like Trulieve and Curaleaf, the McDonald's herb of the world. Or would you guys prefer smaller, medium-sized private businesses, mom and pop shops, that type of thing? Drop in the comments and let me know. Now, despite the fact that Pennsylvania is taking steps to figure this whole legalization thing out, certain states are taking 10 steps backwards as they actually want to put THCA and hemp back on the list of controlled substances. So have a look at that, check that video out because it's coming up right now.